In this section, we're going to be looking at archiving and compression. There's a difference between archiving and compression. So the objectives here are to understand the difference between these two and to learn how to archive, compress, and decompress files and folders. Let me start by explaining the difference between the two terms, archiving and compression. Archiving started a while back, in the early days of Unix. System administrators used to back up files and folders and put them on tapes. These tapes would be stored away just in case the backup was needed at any point in time. Say, for example, there was a system loss, some files get lost or corrupted. They would bring back the tape and would restore the files and folders that are needed. Obviously, that applied to a lot more than just files and folders. So we're talking about databases, for example. But let's not complicate things too much. So archiving in essence was only about taking a backup of the files and folders that we were interested in. However, what would happen is that these files and folders would be copied to the tape and they would still be the same file size and the same folder size as they were originally on the system. So let's say, for example, I'm backing up my documents and my documents are 20 megs in size, for example. If I back them up on a tape or I archive them on the tape, they will still be the exact same size, 20 megs. Compression, however, as the name implies, would compress the files in a way that they would take up less space. So if I compress my documents, they might end up, for example, being 15 megs instead of 20. And that way they will take less space on my archive tapes. And that would end up saving me money, because I wouldn't have to be buying more tapes. I would be saving space on tapes and thus I'd be saving money. And this is why it's very often that you're going to be seeing these technologies or these two commands being used in conjunction. It's rare that you see archiving being used without compression. So that was the original purpose of archiving and compression. However, on top of that, in ethical hacking, we use it for slightly different purposes as well. Here's your post-exploitation tip for this section. After you compromise a host, it's very often that you will be needing to upload and download files. If you remember the section on package management, I told you that Nessus is not installed by default on Kali. As a matter of fact, it's not installed by default on almost all Linux systems. So let's say, for example, you come across a Linux system that you managed to break into, you compromise, and you want to use it as a stepping stone so you can scan another network using Nessus or Nmap. But unfortunately, these tools are not found on that system. What you need to do in that case is get that tool and upload it on the compromised system, assuming, for example, that that system doesn't have internet connectivity, which could be the case in some of corporate environments. We discussed that scenario before, and I told you earlier in the package management section that don't worry back then about how we upload and download files. That's going to be for a different chapter in the course. Now we get to that. So you will come across scenarios where you will have to upload or download files or folders or tools to a compromised system. Another scenario, for example, is you compromise a system but you don't have root access. You compromise it as a regular user. You will need to upload a privilege escalation exploit. That will be an exploit that if you run will give you root access. You might also, as an ethical hacker or as a penetration tester, have to upload or download proof files. So there would be a scenario, for example, that you would be assigned a target and as a proof you need to break into that target and create a text file saying that you were there. So the scenarios are endless really. But what's really sure and certain is that you will definitely be in situations where you will have to upload or download files to systems that are not connected to the internet. So you cannot just browse to any website that you want and download files on that system. You're going to have to do that using your Kali Linux. Usually the first option we go to, if it's available, is the SSH. It's pretty convenient. It allows you to log in remotely. You can use it to upload files, download files, and do pretty much anything that you want. The second option, if SSH is not available, is HTTP. So here I'm talking about turning your Linux box into a web server. Now, there are many other ways that we discuss in advanced courses. So, for example, if it's a Windows system, how you can take advantage of VBScript and PowerShell. If it's other kind of systems, how you can take advantage of TFTP or FTP, and so on. Needless to say, after I talked about all that, uploading one file at a time or downloading one file at a time is going to be a big hassle. And this is where archiving and compression comes in handy. So let's look at the archiving tool in Linux. The archiving tool is called tar, which is short actually for tape archive. To create an archive, you use tar C for create. To append an archive, in other words, to add files or folders to your archive that's already been created, you use the R option, so tar R. To list the contents of an archive without extracting it, you just want to see what's in it, you use tar T. Tar X is to extract the archive. Tar V is for verbose, so it gives you information on the progress and what's going on. Tar F is used to specify the name of the file that you want. If we want to compress our archive, we use one of two tools usually, either gzip or bzip2. Gzip is the classic compression in Linux. bzip2 has more powerful compression, but it takes a little bit more time to compress. Now, frankly speaking, the difference is negligible. You wouldn't really notice any difference if you're working on small files. You might notice a small difference if you're working on files of massive size, but for our purpose, the difference really is negligible. So as you experiment more with Linux, you will come across websites where you can download tools to play around with. And it's very often that you're going to find these tools compressed and archived in gzip format or bzip format. Here are some examples that we're going to be seeing practically in a moment. To create an archive, you use the tar C. Like we said, C is for create, V is for verbose, and F is for the file name. So in this example, I'm doing tar CVF, the archive name, whatever I choose to name it. So I'm in this instance calling it archive.tar, and the files and directories that I want to archive, file 1, file 2, dir 1, and dir 2. Now, if you notice, I've changed the colors of the first letters, and this is just for you to be able to easily spot the difference between archiving and compression and the different options that we're using. You might also have noticed that I'm not using the minus here. We've seen the minus being used all the time. For example, when you're using ls, I'm using ls minus al. When I'm using rm, I'm using rm minus rf for the options. Tar is one of the very few tools that I don't have to use the minus when I'm using an option. So, carrying on, to list the content of an archive, we said it's tar T, and V for verbose, and F is the file name. So notice that it's pretty much all constant. The only thing changing is the first letter. If I want to append or add a file or directory, it's tar R. That's the only thing that's changing. V is still constant, F is still constant, the file name is still constant, and whatever I'm adding at the end. Let's see how that looks like practically. I've created 3 different directories and 3 different files. So I'm going to start by creating the archive. To do that, I want to use the tar C for create, V for verbose, and F for the file name. In this case, my file name is archive.tar, and whatever I want to archive. dir 1, dir 2, file 1, and file 2. Because I've used the V option, which is for verbose, I get a list of what's been archived. And notice that automatically dir 1 and its subdirectory and dir 2 and its subdirectory are archived. Now let me list the content of the archive just to verify what I have. And for that I use the tar T to list, and then the remaining is still the same, V, F, and the archive name. Perfect. Now let's say I want to append my archive. I forgot to add dir 3 and file 3. To append to my archive, I use the R option. So tar R, VF is still the same, archive is still the same, and whatever I want to add to my archive, dir 3 and file 3. I'll verify that again using the tar T, VF, and the archive name, and here we go. Now I have all the contents of my directory in the archive. Let me clear up the screen. I'm going to create a directory called backup and copy my archived file into the backup directory. Now I'm going to navigate to the backup directory, and all I have in that directory is just the tar file or the archive file. And I'm going to show you now how to extract files and folders. First of all, let's say I want to extract only one file or only one folder. I don't want to extract the entire archive. I would still use the same command, tar x for extract vf, which is still the same, verbose file name, the file name archive.tar, and whatever I want to extract, in this case file 3. If I do ls, I'll see that file 3 is now extracted. Let me try that again with dir3. If I do ls, I have dir3 extracted as well. Excellent. So you don't actually have to extract everything. You can pick and choose whatever you want to extract. If I want to extract everything, I say tar x for extract vf and the archive name, and here we go. I've extracted everything. I'll clear the screen and I'm gonna go back to the temp directory. Let me show you what's on my desktop. Doing an ls home desktop, there's nothing there, it's empty. So let's say I'm now in my temp directory and I want to extract my archive, but I want to do that, I want the extracted files to be on the desktop. I don't want them to be in the temp directory. To do that, I can specify the directory where I want to extract using -C option. So the command is tar xvf archive name -C and the destination directory. So now everything got extracted on my desktop. Now let's say I want to archive and compress the files. I'm going to start with the GZ files. To create those, I do tar z, and z will be always used when we're dealing with .gz files, or z if you are British. And the rest is going to be the same. So that's the way to memorize these commands easily. And this is what it looks like. Tar zcvf compressed .tar.gz and the files I want to archive. If I want to use bzip2, instead of z, I use j. And still exactly the same for the rest of the command. Notice though that I do change the extension. And here we go. Now I have two different files, compressed and zipped. To list, again, it's tvf. If I want to list gz files, I do ztvf. And if I want to list bzip2, I use jtvf. Let's see how the extraction works. First, I'm going to create a directory called gz, and I'll copy the compressed file to the directory. Then I'm going to cd to the directory. So if I want to extract, you should know how to do that by now. It's tar z for the gz files, and then x for extract, v and f. And I can specify the file name if I want, or I can extract everything if I so choose. I do ls to verify. Let me go back and let me do the same thing with the bz2 file. So I'm going to create a directory called bzip. In this case though, I'm not going to copy it to the bzip directory. I'm going to use the -C option that we saw earlier. So again, tar j this time because it's a bzip file, x for extract, vf, the name of the file, -C and the destination directory. I do ls to verify it. By the way, here's a cool thing that you might have noticed. When I'm typing tar j xvf and I type the name of the file and I hit tab for auto completion, tab will automatically complete with the correct extension. So if I'm using JXVF, it automatically completes the BZ2 file. If I'm using the ZXVF, it automatically completes the GZ file. Alright, so that was it. To see how we can upload and download these files to the victim machine, you're gonna have to wait for part 2.